to kind of give you a bit of a history of where I'm from, Rwanda is a very tiny little country in central east of Africa, a country that went through a lot of tribal unrest. And on the map that you see, on the north we have Uganda, in the south is Burundi, on the east is Tanzania, on the west is Congo. It's a landlocked kind of little country. People were united at some point in the history, but during the colonial time in the 1800s, the people of Rwanda were divided in 3 tribes. And those tribes were the Hutus, the Tutsis, and the Twa. Now, during the division of the tribe, the separation of the tribe, they would actually measure the length of your nose to figure out what tribe you were. And so if you are very tall, they would say if you are very tall and slim and you have a pointy nose, that means you are a Tutsi. And if you're very short and very muscular built, that means you're a Hutu. So they came up with these distinctions in order to divide the people of Rwanda. At that time, Rwanda had monarchy, but during the monarchy time, the monarchy was considered to be Tutsi, and so they were favoring the Tutsis who were on power on the monarchy. But then eventually the monarchy kind of saw that, that the separating of the tribe separating people into tribes was a form of manipulating the people. The monarchy said, you know what, we don't like that. And so now the colonies went and favored the Hutus, and hatred was created between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And so that hatred continued to grow until in the 60s, Rwanda got its independence. And the very first government that came on was considered to be Hutu. And now hatred had some power. And those people who were ingrained in that hatred continued to grow. And then in the 90s, the United Nations wanted to bring these 2 groups because a lot of the Tutsis who fled the country, who are being tortured, fled and would form an army eventually, and they would come to kind of try to stop the government from torturing the Tutsis. But through that, the UN was kind of trying to bring a reconciliation between these 2 guys, these 2 groups. But then on April 6th, the big genocide against the Tutsi tribe that you probably read about in books or even seen movies about is in 1994, on April 6th, the Rwandan president was assassinated, and that became the spark to the hatred. And at this time, young men at this time in 1994, young men who had grown up being told that Tutsis are bad people, being told of this hatred when they were little, they are now about 15 to 35-year-olds, are the ones who were brainwashed, and they continued to do to fuel the hatred. I remember on April 7th, when we woke up that morning, we had noises from a distance, and we could not figure out what the noise was. That noise, our neighbor came to us and told us that the noise were bombs going off from a distance because the Rwandan president had been assassinated the night before. And so my grandmother was scared because at this time she had survived all of this hatred over the years. Me and my brother and my sister, we were living with our grandmother because our mother had passed away of HIV/AIDS when we were very little, and we never knew who our father was. And so her and our uncles were the ones we looked up to. But it was literally that next morning on April 7th that we were attacked, and unfortunately our grandmother would be killed. And she would be killed by not only strangers, but just people that we knew by name, neighbors of ours, people we considered friends. And so we could not fathom this. As a 6-year-old watching this happen, it was just we couldn't even fathom that a neighbor would do that to us. Now we had those 2 uncles who were with us. One of them was known to be the one to provide for the family, and so they would come back later on looking for one of the uncles, and they couldn't find him. But we had hid him under the bed, so when they were taking their weapons and throwing under the bed, they couldn't get to him because he had pulled himself on the springs of the bed. So they would leave. But 3 days later, 3 men with their weapons came back and said, "He is under the bed, let him get out." And up to today, we don't know what happened. So they would come and they would yell at him, and then he would say, he would hesitate a little bit because he did not know whether they were joking or not. And then they would say, "If he doesn't come out, we're going to destroy the house." And the last words our uncle said was, "Please, don't destroy the house. I will come out. Do not destroy the house because my kids need a place to live." So he would come outside, and they would ask for his identity card. At age of 18 and older, you had to have an identity card. And that identity card specifically said what tribe you were. And of course, he was a Tutsi. And they also take his life. Again, thinking, why in the world are these neighbors of ours doing this to us? How can they do that? How can they hate us? We didn't even do anything to them at all. And so now we would be left with one uncle, and that uncle would bribe the militias for the following week. And when he had no money left, he would tell us to go and run. So we ran into the city where our auntie lived, and it was about an hour and a half walk from the village to where the city is. So we get into the city, we live with our aunt, and while we were with our aunt, and life there in the city was getting worse and worse as well, because a lot of people from the villages were coming, and when they would come into the city, we had so many family members who were coming into the city, and we had about 19 people in our family who were living with our aunt in the city. And so my aunt and her husband needed to do something to provide for this family because the water supply in the city had been destroyed. So they came up with this idea of selling local beer in the living room. So these men would come and buy what they wanted, their drink, and they were supposed to leave. But one day, one of the men managed to sneak into the backyard with his weapon, and he sees all of us in the backyard. He takes his weapon and he's yelling at us and he's trying to load. And he said, all of you kids, lie down. All of you people, lie down. And in the process of loading his weapon, his magazine fell out of the weapon instead. And his ammunition were all over the ground. And as he tried to reload to kind of pick up his stuff, my aunt's husband comes in the backyard and sees what's happening. And he said, what are you trying to do with my family? And the guy said, no, I was just joking. I was just playing with them. He was not there to joke around. If his weapon would have been loaded, I would not be standing in front of you today. So the city got worse. Eventually, we had to run. And this little country is known as a land of 1,000 hills. And so let me tell you, if you're not climbing a hill, you're going down one hill. And so we climbed these hills, thousands of people. The whole city pretty much packed up and started to run. And we're kind of caught in the middle when refugees who had formed an army and left Rwanda, and they were coming back to stop the government and to stop the genocide, were chasing out the militias, and all these refugees were caught in the middle, including our family. So we get into this valley. This is probably the most vivid way that God saved my life, a very humorous way that he saved my life that I always love to share because it just shows the heart of God. So I was running, and I would hear a noise coming from a distance. I did not know what the noise was, and all of a sudden I slipped and fell. When I fell, that noise missed my head by an inch. And I was 6 years old, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So I run, and I find out. My brother and I were young enough, so we just kind of, any noise that happened, we were going after the noise, trying to figure out what it was. So we find out that noise was a bullet that missed my head because I had slipped in a cow pie. And that's why God used to save my life. Let me tell you, we've been in western Kansas, and I tell you, I saw a lot of cattle, and I'm sure with that comes a lot of cow patties around the way. But I was thinking God can use that. He used that to save my life, and I'm very glad he did. I don't tell that to gross you out this evening. I know because it's gross, but I share that with you to show the power of God and what he can do. Our God works in mysterious ways, but our God likes to work in gross ways as well sometimes. And sometimes we don't want to see the gross part. But at the end of this war, after running for months, I was put in an orphanage by my aunt. And that aunt passed away because of illnesses right after I got into the orphanage, about 3 months later. My brother and I went into the orphanage, and our sister went to live with the friends. She was too old to go in the orphanage. We get into this orphanage, and many of us in the orphanage had lost our loved ones, and life in the orphanage was very hard because now that kids were not running physically, our minds started to recall everything that had happened. So the adrenaline had weared off, and so post-traumatic stress was so great. And so we're in this orphanage. In the facilities, it was beautiful, only 60 people, just packed. Over the whole time, from April 6th to July 4th, when the genocide was considered over about 1 million people were killed, and over 400,000 orphans were left. and 250 of us were in that orphanage. Around this time, since the country, the doors were open, the borders were open, many organizations started to come in to help. And one of those organizations was Samaritan's Purse. And Samaritan's Purse responds to different disasters around the world and around the country, here in the United States. In 1994, the genocide against the Tutsi tribe was the disaster happening, so they responded. They helped people physically. They they refurbished a hospital and cleaned the place and started to treat people. But they came to our orphanage because in 1993, Samaritan's Purse had taken on a project called Operation Christmas Child, and that is the project that you are very familiar with. And so they brought Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes to us. And in the picture on the screen, that's me when I was 7 years old, around the time I got my shoebox. And the kids you see on the screen behind me, that's where we lined up to receive our shoeboxes. So we lined up, and they hand out these gifts, and then they told us, hey, do not open your shoeboxes until all of them have been handed out. Now, imagine telling a 7-year-old to hold a Christmas present on Christmas morning. It's hard, right? But they wanted us to experience that moment together of opening a shoebox gift, a gift, not a gift we were getting on a Christmas day or on our birthdays, but this, as a 7-year-old, this was the very first gift I ever received in my life. And it was very special when we got to open all the shoeboxes, all of us at once, screaming of excitement. Not because we were being chased, but screaming because we could not contain the joy of receiving a gift for the very first time. And I remember as I opened my shoebox, I saw the school supplies, the hygiene items, little toy cars, little bouncy balls, all these socks and underwears, and all these little coloring books. We were able to create new memories. Remember what we were having in the night? We're having so many nightmares. So when we, in our minds, we needed something different, something to create something new images. And so when we are taking that brush of the paintbrush and dipping it in water and then dipping it in the paint, and we're carrying that coloring book, we're creating new memories in our minds that in the middle of the night we couldn't think about what happened during the war, but we could think of opening a gift, that excitement that we had. That excitement we had when we had to open some of the items and we had no idea what they were. Items such as Smarties. Smarties, those little candies that are twisted on the end. We thought they were medicine. Yeah, Smarties. Yeah. Little candies that look like little pills. If you take one by one. We thought, why in the world would they send us medicine? So we'd throw the Smarties back in the shoebox. But we would wait until one of the kids would try one of the Smarties. And it just, oh, yes, you see, someone has one. Here, I take some. I'll take some. There you go. Yes. I always know that someone in the crowd is going to have one. Yeah. Yes, these little Smarties right here. If you take one by one, they look like pills. So we thought, this is medicine. So we throw them back in the box. But curiosity, is great. So one of the kids would eat one of these little ones to figure out what they were. And so we just kind of wait until 5 minutes and nothing happened to them. Then the rest of us would eat ours, and we have a great time. Someone who had to take one for the team. It wasn't about to be me. So I want to share with you, though, my favorite item in my shoebox. I was that kid who, curiosity got to me. And I looked through the shoebox, and we were trying to figure out what this item was. It didn't smell good. It didn't feel good. So I decided to eat this item, and halfway through it, I realized it was wrapped in plastic. And that was, yeah, I know, right? That was my first time eating a candy cane. And up to today, every time I see a candy cane, I remember receiving my Operation Christmas Child shoebox. But the original candy cane is wrapped so tight that it's nearly impossible to see the plastic, let alone if you don't know what it is already. So we couldn't even see the plastic, so we ate it. And it tasted better, by the way, without the wrapper. Yeah. But at the end of receiving that shoebox, receiving the candy cane, receiving all the school supplies in that shoebox brought us so much joy. And the orphanage director used that opportunity to share with us about Jesus Christ. And I want to also kind of side note, I've shared my testimony before, and people go out into the store and they wipe out all the candy canes in the store. I just want to share with you that many of you know this, but the ministry was having a rough time getting shoeboxes in the countries because of two items: candy and toothpaste. So the ministry decided to do no candy and no toothpaste because the main mission of this shoebox is not to give candy, it's not to give toothpaste. The main mission of this shoebox is to give Jesus Christ to a child. And that is still happening. If it can happen without the candy and toothpaste, and so the ministry decided to do that, to make that decision. So if you didn't know, now you know, and if you know someone who doesn't, share it with someone else. But the shoebox planted seeds of hope and love in my life, that a year later, I went to Uganda and I joined a choir called African Children's Choir. And while I was in Uganda, that's when God started to get a hold of my heart because I was still angry. At this time, I was angry and asking God, where are you? Do you care about me? I was reading the Bible and I knew that the Bible was the Word of God. But I would ask, why then, if you love your people, if you send your son Jesus Christ to die on the cross for your children, why would you watch while a million of your children are being killed in Rwanda? Why? And do you love me? I felt guilty of being alive because for 3 months, a million people lost their lives. I walked right through it and not even a single scratch on my skin. And I was wondering, why? And asking, I blamed God for everything. The more I blamed him, the more I missed out on the miracles that he did. And as a 9-year-old, I read this verse. God used this verse to communicate to me that he had a plan for my life. It's a verse that is definitely familiar to all of us. It says, Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans of welfare and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." As a 9-year-old, I did not know the journey, the history of the Israelites or this prophet Jeremiah. I was a 9-year-old, vulnerable, and to the point where if any kind of faith would have come to me, I would have latched on that kind of faith. But God took me out of Rwanda and started to reveal himself to me. And in about a year period, as I discovered coming to faith, I realized the journey of the Israelites and how God did so many miracles in their life, protecting them from the Egyptians by walking on dry land in the middle of the sea, by praying to God for food and food literally falling from heaven, by crying for for water because they were thirsty and getting water. They forgot all those miracles, and what did they end up doing? Making a god for themselves in the desert to worship. In my own life, I was doing exactly the same thing because I missed out on the miracle that when my grandmother and my uncle were both taken away from me, when they both killed, I was about 100 feet from the events. There was nothing to shelter me from everything that was happening. And so they had no reason. The goal during that genocide against the Tutsi was to wipe out everybody, including the people who, everybody, including children, and including men who were the head of the family. And so I missed out on all those miracles. And I missed out on the miracle that a man's weapon didn't load when he went to pull the trigger. I missed out on the miracle that when I slipped on a cow pie, just a split second, a bullet missed my head. I missed out on the miracle that I went to an orphanage and received a gift for the very first time, a gift that reminded me of God's love, a gift that reminded me to be a boy again, a gift that planted seeds of the good news of Jesus Christ. And so when I saw all those miracles, that's when I gave my heart to the Lord. But I didn't want him to touch part of my heart because part of it was full of bitterness, anger, and rage. I was so angry at this time while I was in Uganda with this choir and coming to the United States to travel with this choir. I was so bitter to the point where I actually wanted to do exactly the same thing that those people did to my family. And that scared me, that hatred, that bitterness was in my heart. And within this time, we came to the United States and traveled with this choir. And so the picture you see on the screen is when I met a family that would later on adopt me into their family. And that's when we met in October 1999, and we were traveling over the United States. But while we were traveling, one of the chaperones came to me and said, "Alex, tell me a story. What happened in your life that you're able to be here today?" And I remember sharing my testimony for the very first time and how therapeutic that felt. And I remember, as I shared my testimony, how awesome it felt. And then I shared it even more and more. But then she asked me a powerful question, and she said, "Alex, what if you would sit with the person who has caused you the most pain in your life? what would you do? And that question just ate me alive, but that question also challenged me, and I started to pray. Lord, I want to be able to heal. I want to be able to come to that point where I can be able to see the person who has caused me pain. And so I started to pray, and within this time I'm praying, it's a kind of a long time of prayer. God answers our prayers in His own timing, not ours. And so 12 years I'm praying. Within these 12 years, I would finish my tour in the United States, and I would go back to Rwanda. Then in 2003, that's when that sense of humor from God happened, and I moved into this family in Minnesota. And then in 2008, I got the chance to go back to Rwanda, and I was trying to kind of pursue my process of healing. But before while I was in high school and college, I saw Operation Christmas Child, and I remember student council was going to do the pack shoeboxes, and I wanted to get involved really bad. So I asked the guys who were heading up the project in my school, and I said, what is Operation Christmas Child? You know what they did? They showed me the logo. And let me tell you, my tape rewinded, and I started to tell them everything. You know how you get excited and you speak so fast, and someone is just staring at you and says, what you're talking about? Slow down. That was me. But I got a chance to tell them how that meant to me, and I was so excited. And in high school, I did pack shoeboxes. In college, I would take it on. And this is an idea that you can take on and use it in your own community, okay? So this is what we used to do in college. We would invite the students in the student center. We would ask them to bring shoebox items. And then we would watch a movie, and we would make hot chocolate. It's always cold in Minnesota by October. And then we would make popcorn, and we'd have a great time with the friends. And we would watch Elf. So I'm telling you, to prepare for Christmas, we'd watch Elf, we'd pack shoeboxes, and we'd have a great time with the friends. So there you go. I just planned your next packing party at your own church or your own small group or something. But when we would pack these shoeboxes, we would drop them off at a church, and I did not know the whole picture of the ministry. But in 2009, I caught the vision. In 2009, that's when I learned about the greatest journey that you saw in the video. How kids today who are receiving shoeboxes, once they receive the shoebox, through their church, they're being discipled. And the journey doesn't stop once they get that shoebox. The journey has only begun. And I remember hearing how through the local church, through the national leadership team members, the volunteers around the world are using those shoeboxes as a tool to share the gospel. I went back to my school, and we doubled the number of shoeboxes we were packing, because I knew that today kids are being discipled and hearing the gospel, and it was so awesome. But in that year of 2013, I moved to North Carolina, and that's where I am today, and to do an internship with the ministry. And then in that year also, I got an opportunity, a very awesome opportunity. I traveled back to Rwanda, back to the same orphanage, to deliver shoeboxes. And that is the picture you see on the screen. And the picture you see on the screen was me translating a letter that a person had written for that boy. And let me tell you, if you've never written a letter in your shoebox, I encourage you to do that. If you're comfortable with it, put in your picture or an address, and you never know, you may get a letter back. But it's so beautiful when that boy connected with the person who wrote that letter, who packed that shoebox. And it was awesome to be able to see kids even going through the greatest journey, and it was just so beautiful. But I want to shift and share with you about my own journey. I remember how I mentioned that I had been praying for years, praying and asking God, help me to heal. So in this journey of faith in my life, I was been just struggling a lot and asking God, help me, because in my anger, I did not see the people who caused me pain the way God sees them. But so in 2008, on one of my trips, I tried to meet the people, and I found out, so the government decided to release about 40,000 people who committed crimes in the country, and they were taken back to their villages, and they were doing the trial in the villages. This process in the Rwandan culture is called gacaca. And so these gacaca courts, gacaca trials would happen in a village setting. So people would come, the community would come and would testify, and these guys would have an opportunity to ask for forgiveness. And even the community would get a chance to hear testimonies. But what I did, I went to that meeting in my village, and I found out that the only two people who didn't show up was the guy who killed my grandmother and the guy who killed my uncle. And I was so confused and asking, Lord, in this year of 2008, you gave me an opportunity to go back to Rwanda. I'm taking my step, but you're not taking yours. It is not fair. And so we know very well we operate on his timing again, not my timing. And so I came back to the U.S. and went back to school. But then on this trip, when we delivered shoeboxes, I thought, I'm in the country already. Why not try to see if I could meet with them this time? And went to the prison, and just a process that would have taken about 3 weeks. In about 3 hours, we had all the permission, we had all the paperwork to go into the prison, and we found out that the man who had killed my grandmother fled and left, and the man who had killed my uncle was still there. And it was the most hardest day of my life, being able to stand next to this person and ask him, do you remember me? And he would say, no, I don't remember it specifically, but I remember 3 children being there. And I would say, tell me, where were you? Why did you come? And he would say, some of the things we're doing while we came were just following orders. And that was the hardest day of my life, but also the most freeing day of my life, because all the anger that I had, in my anger, I missed out that this man is creating an image of God. God's heart aches for him. And I missed out. I did not want to accept that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die for him as well. I missed out that God did not love me more because I was an innocent 6-year-old boy. God did not love him less because he and his group killed more than 30 people. But the gospel I missed out was that we are loved the same. In God's eyes, we are the same. If this man asks for forgiveness, God will forgive him. And actually, some of the people who committed crimes in that country of Rwanda, actually some of them have asked the Lord to forgive them, and they're living in the freedom of Jesus Christ. But the people who are considered to be the victims are living in bondage of bitterness and anger because they cannot find the heart to forgive that person. So let's say Jesus Christ comes back today. Who sits in glory with Jesus Christ? This guy right here, who is redeemed of everything that has happened. And the person here who is angry and cannot find the heart to forgive is living in bondage. And if Jesus Christ came today, misses the kingdom of heaven because of the anger. And so my prayer is that the country continue to heal. The country is healing really well, and the country is doing well. The country is safe, economically is doing well. But inside, there's some people who are still struggling with that. And so why do I share this with you this evening? I share this with you. One of the reasons is to share what God has done, not what I've done, because there's no way in my human nature I would ever wanted to sit in front of that man. But it's what Jesus Christ did, not only in my life, but in your life as well. The seeds were planted in my life through a little shoebox as a 7-year-old, living in an orphanage, lost all hope. A stranger who I've never met planted seeds of hope and love in my life. And so I shared that to give him all the glory. But that because the seeds came from someone else came and watered those seeds in my life and discipled me and loved on me. And that's when I was able to see that this man is also loved by God. And I want to share a verse with you that shares really deeply of why I share my testimony with you. It's Psalms 105, verse 1 through 5, which says, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people. Sing to him, sing praise to him, tell of all the wondrous works. Glory in his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Seek the Lord and his strength. Seek his presence continually. Remember the wondrous works that he has done and his miracles and judgment that he uttered." All that I just shared with you today is to share the wondrous works that he's done, not only in my life, but in your life as well. And I always want to share that with you and challenge you. A question that had been asked me, Alex, what if you would sit with the person who has caused you the most pain? Fill in that gap. Say your name and say, so-and-so, what if you would sit with the person who has caused you the most pain? Who is that in your life? Who is that man on the screen who has caused you pain? Maybe it could be your family, could be your friend, could be your neighbor, could be your own self. Maybe something happened in your life and you've never taken the time to forgive yourself for whatever happened. What if you left the church today and you had to spend the time with that person who has caused you the most pain? I'm here to say that even you, if you're watching on Facebook Live. What if you had to sit with the person who has caused you the most pain in your life? What would you do? Jesus Christ sent his son. Jesus Christ came and died for us. He came and died for those people as well. The person who's caused you pain, we're both all loved by him. And that's why we share the gospel with the children around the world. That's why we pack shoeboxes so that one more child can hear the good news of Jesus Christ, that they can live in the freedom that Jesus Christ offered. And there are a couple of steps that I took. Before I open up questions, I want to share this. There are a couple of steps that I prayed for to happen. One of them was to meet the guys who committed crimes upon my family. The other two items have not happened yet, and I'm still pursuing that opportunity to do that. The other step is to go back to Rwanda someday and run the route that we were fleeing. We ran while we were fleeing. I mapped it out on Google and came to about 28 miles. I've grown up running, and I love running, and so I want to do it someday. It's a lot of hills, though, and that's what I'm not ready for. But then the other one is very random. I will explain. Bear with me. I want to buy a goat someday. So my brother and I were goat herders. We took care of our neighbor's goats. And so the neighbor said, hey, take care of our goats. When they give birth to their kids, we're going to have a goat. So the genocide happened when we were about to get our goat. So I don't know about you. I'm going to get my goat someday. I share that with you to kind of share with you to ask you what is your next step. Maybe your next step in your life is to stop blaming God for everything that happened in your life from the day you were born and actually see the miracles that he's done in your life and stop blaming him and accept him as your Lord and Savior. Best decision you ever make. Maybe your next step is you actually have him in your heart, but he's not deep in your heart because that deep part of your heart is full of bitterness, anger, and rage towards the person who has caused you the most pain. Maybe your next step is to knock on the door and say, look, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to live in the freedom that Jesus Christ offered. Maybe your next step is you know the Lord, you accept him as the Lord, your Savior, but you've never taken a step to share that good news with someone else. Maybe your next step is to do that through Operation Christmas Child. Or maybe you do that already, but you've never done that to your next door neighbor. And you know them, that they don't know the Lord. Maybe your next step is to do that. Or maybe your next step is to, God has given you gifts. God has given you talents. I tell people that I love to talk. I can't talk. And that's a gift God has given me. But maybe your next step, you have gifts of connecting with people and connecting with churches. Operation Christmas Child has an opportunity, volunteer opportunities all year round. If you're a year-round volunteer, would you please raise your hand? Year-round volunteers. See those hands up? You can put your hands down. Those are people who work year-round. They're not paid by Operation Christmas Child. They're not full-time staff with Operation Christmas Child. They're volunteers within their communities who have a heart to share the gospel of Jesus Christ through Operation Christmas Child, but who have a heart to connect with different groups, different churches, different schools, sharing so that one more box can be packed, so that one more child can hear the gospel around the world. And so maybe your next step is to use those gifts that God has given you, and you have the time and you're called to do that. If that's you, can find more information. We'll actually be out here. We can talk to us anytime. But however that looks in your life, God bless you, and I'm just so happy to be here. I want to open it up for questions so that I can give us a chance to, if you have anybody who has a burning question to ask, and you feel free to ask any questions. I will do my best to answer. Any questions at all? Yes? What was my favorite thing that I got in the shoebox? There were two items that were my favorite. One was a hair comb it was so unique. And you would open it on one side, a little peak came out. I picked my little afro that I had that time. And then you would open it on one side, a little brush would come out, and you would brush your hair. So I kept that hair comb for the next 3 years, everywhere I went. I was so sad when I lost that hair comb. Then the other item was the candy cane. Yeah, that we cannot pack in the shoebox anymore. I did. Yeah, I did. I did. But it was so fun. No, the trip when I went back to Rwanda in 2013 to deliver shoeboxes, at that time, it was okay to pack candy and toothpaste at that time. So when kids were opening their shoebox and I'm there and I'm looking at it, and they'd pick up the candy cane and they would ask me what it was, kind of kind of, it's like, no, you figure it out. Yeah. You figured it out. I had to figure out the hard way. So, because I didn't want to steal the joy of telling them what it is right away. I wanted them to kind of have that curiosity that, of course, I wouldn't let them eat it with a wrapper on it. Like, I wouldn't be that cruel. Yeah. Yeah. Any other question? Yes. What happened to my brother and my sister? So my brother got an opportunity to get adopted into a different family here in the United States. And today he lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then my sister is still back in Rwanda raising a family, and I get a chance to see her every time I go back. Yeah. Awesome. I'll tell you about my family. So my family, right now, immediate family, is a family of two. Me and my wife, her name is Amy, and we met back in 2013, and she lived in Branson area, Missouri, and Branson, yeah, and so we met there when I went to speak at College of the Ozarks. Mutual friends connected us, and the rest is history. 2017, April 22nd, we got married, and we just celebrated our second anniversary. And so she gets to also get to be part of this ministry in a different setting, because Samaritan's Purse has different projects. And another project that they do is called Children's Heart Project, where they bring kids with congenital heart defect. They bring them to the United States or Canada to get surgery. And the hospitals donate the surgery, and Samaritan's Purse transports the kids here. And it's a ministry because, let's say they come to a city like Rochester, Minnesota is one of the most places they take at Mayo Clinic. And so they find a family in Rochester with a Christian family that is connected to a church. And so when they bring that family, that child, they come up either with a relative, either a mom or a sister, and a translator. And then they live with that family, and it's a form of way to share the gospel while they're here for their kids. So they spend several months to prepare for the surgery. But once they're done with the surgery and they are cleared by the doctor to fly back, then they ask nurses, they contract nurses to send them back to the country. And Amy, my wife, is one of the nurses that can be asked to do that, and it's so beautiful. So last trip they did was to Mongolia. A very furthest remote country. Yeah. Any other question at all? Yeah.
Can you explain a little more how you were connected with your family that adopted you?
Yeah. Can I share a little bit more about how I was connected with the family? Another huge miracle. So we got to meet this family in 1999. We were traveling with the choir. While we were traveling with the African Children's Choir, we were staying in 4 homes a week, average of 4 homes a week for 2.5 years. United States, US, Canada, and the UK. And during that time, in October 1999, I remember we crossed over into Minnesota, and I mapped it, wrote state number so-and-so. And when we got to meet this family, they sent us this picture, and behind this picture, there was an address. And years later, I didn't even know that the address was there, and my goal was not to ask the family to come live with them. My goal was just to, they're sending a letter to America, work from Rwanda. That really, does it get to America if you wrote it? And sure enough, it did. So in April, I wrote the letter. In May, I get a reply from the family saying, "Hey, what can we do for you and your friend to come back and go to school?" And we actually thought they were joking. They were joking at the beginning, but it was serious. And God just worked it out. And in July, we got our visas, our student visas. And in August, we were on a flight to Minneapolis. We had not communicated with the family at all since that picture was taken. And it's just another miracle that all of a sudden, my life changed. And I came to Minnesota, started high school, and and the rest, we still, so that's our family today. I still go back to Minnesota. Yeah. Any other question? Well, thank you so much. I'm going to be here. Oh, there's one more. Yes. What was my first thought when I first came over here? So there's 2 ways I'm going to answer that question, okay? The first time I ever came here, I was 9 years old with the African Children's Choir. I landed in Houston, Texas. And so I tell people, as a 9-year-old coming to America, it's like telling a person to move on a train that is moving 100 miles an hour. And you see it, but you gotta get on because the life is very fast paced. And so, but we adjusted really quick. We jumped in. Man, there's so many stories that I want to share right now, but I don't think we have the time. It was awesome experiencing the culture and seeing the development was probably the most shocking for me as a little boy. But then when I came back in 2003, it was the culture shock wasn't even more about the development. It was more about family setting. Because for me, unfortunately, all I had ever known is orphanage life. So to be in a family, it was different. And it worked really well, and it was beautiful that God provided us with a family, and was wonderful. We get a chance the curriculum at school was different, so we had to adjust to that. And then with my, again, this is a given. I'm just sharing, being real with my accent. So I have to be very careful because some of the words don't come out differently, or we have to. I tell people, I would tell my family, I would rather tell you something 100 times than you pretend like you heard me and you didn't quite understand what I said. And so those were kind of cultural nuances we had to kind of jump over. But it was beautiful. That's life, doing with the family. But I love this country, and my goodness, it's home. So actually, I believe this year, last year was when I hit the mark. Half of my life in Rwanda and half of my life here. So when you ask me where is home, where is home for you? It's one of those like, well, home is where I am at the moment. Yeah, but it's beautiful, and this is my home, and I look to going back and forth. Yeah. Yeah. First. Okay. There's two questions that have been asked. One question is, is this my first time in Kansas? And then the second question is, the shoebox, do they go in the same place over and over again? This is not my first time in Kansas, but it's my first time being on the western side of Kansas. It's been really good. Like very different, and it's beautiful. I tell people if the whole country was flat, or it would be different. It would be not as unique. If the country was full of green and full of mountains, it would be boring also. But so the diversity of the country is beautiful, and that's why I love to see this country. From west to east, south to north, it's beautiful. The other question about shoeboxes. So the shoeboxes, today, we are so excited that Operation Christmas Child partners with the local churches in more than 160 countries. And it's not Operation Christmas Child that comes and delivers the shoeboxes. Within those countries, we call them national leadership team members, made of pastors and Sunday school teachers who are trained to share the gospel, who are trained by Operation Christmas Child to do an outreach using the shoebox. And those national leadership team members, volunteers, they have a heart to reach their community. And so when they have that heart to reach their community, they go to that community, do an outreach, share the gospel, follow up with those kids once they receive the shoebox, and they follow up with them with the greatest journey. And so they know not to go back to that same area, because the goal for the ministry is for one shoebox for one child in a lifetime, because that's an opportunity to share the gospel with one more person. And so, but those volunteers are the one who come with this plan, because they know, let's say, hey, we've been in, I'm going to use Ark City as an example. We've been in Ark City, so we're going to be in this area, so we're not going to go back next year, because kids there from 2 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, those kids who have received the shoeboxes 2 to 4 are probably going to be aging out So then they go back when the 2 to 4, the kids who are 2 to 4 have been edged out. And then there's more kids who can receive the shoeboxes this time. And it's beautiful how it's working really well. And through that, just last year alone, 2 million kids gave their hearts to Jesus Christ through that follow-up discipleship program and going to that communities. And then keep going to a different community. And it's beautiful that those guys are doing it because they speak the language, they know the culture. And so Operation Christmas Child just kind of comes and gives them the tools to do that. And it's awesome. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. I hope I answered that question really good. It's beautiful because if Operation Christmas Child just came and did and hand out the shoeboxes and left, it wouldn't do good. Yes, kids would be excited, but then what happens to their spiritual excitement will still be lost and so on. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. We give glory to God for what He's done tonight.